morning. I'm Connie Lukes, and today we're at the Crown Bakery on Gold Star Boulevard, and we have some wonderful pastries and cookies that we have in front of us that are really toxic but delicious, and we love coming here. And today I'm having coffee with Evelyn Herwitz, and Evelyn has some notoriety in Worcester if you frequent bookstores. She's an author, and she wrote Trees at Risk in the year 2001. And in the book is a prediction about the Asian longhorn beetle, which is somewhat scary that she was aware of it, and unfortunately the worst has come to pass. Evelyn, you're not a native of Worcester. How'd you get here? Where did your journey start to get here?
Well, I grew up in New York, Westchester County, and then I moved to Rochester, where I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Rochester.
Undergraduate in what?
Psychology.
Psychology,
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Then I moved to Pittsburgh, and I went to Carnegie Mellon University and got a master's in public management.
Okay.
And I moved to Springfield, Illinois, where I worked for the state in the Bureau of the Budget, and eventually then went back to school and got a master's in public affairs reporting at the University of Illinois. From there, I ended up coming back to the East Coast, settled in Worcester, and started working as news director at WICN when they first affiliated with NPR. Mm-hmm. And from there, I lost my job when the Reagan administration cut all the corporation public broadcasting budgets in the 80s, and I ended up starting a statewide news service for public radio for 4 NPR affiliates, and did that for a year and a half. And then switched into print, started doing a lot of writing about the environment, and that's how I ended up writing about the city's trees.
You've worn a lot of hats. You went from psychology to being an author and looking at our urban forest.
Right.
And you wrote the book. Well, how long did you spend on writing the book?
It took 6 years.
Did it?
Yeah.
So you started in 1995?
No. Well, the book was published. I finished the manuscript in 97.
Oh, 97.
So
okay.
I started writing it in 91.
Oh, really?
But I got interested in the issue a few years before that, actually, when my daughter, who's now 20, was a baby, and I used to take her for walks on May Street. I'd be pushing the stroller and have the dog in tow, and I realized that the trees on our street were dying. And that's how I got interested in the subject, and I wrote a story about it for what was then Inside Worcester magazine. Mm-hmm. Doesn't exist anymore. But then from that I met John Trexler at the Worcester County Horticultural Society. He was working on an update of a book by Arabella Tucker called Trees of Worcester, and I ended up taking over the work on that book and turning it into a much bigger project.
When we talk about being an author of a book, what are the mechanics of actually getting the book into print and then selling it and getting people to read it?
Well, it's complicated.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, what we ended up doing, we went to a couple of different publishers. When I was finished with the manuscript, it was picked up by Chandler House Press, which was a local publishing house at the time. And what we worked out was an arrangement that some of the proceeds from the book would go towards a fund to help plant trees for the city.
Is there any money in that fund?
I think it's been spent.
Too bad, we need it now.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
And so that was how the book got published.
How many copies did you have printed up?
There were 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so some of them sold at that time. I actually made copies of them and now selling them through my website.
What is your website?
It is treesatrisk.com.
Oh, good. All right, we'll scroll that under your name then when we do the airing, because I'd love to see more people getting access to this book.
Thank you.
When you wrote it, how many people helped you? Because that's always an issue. People see authors as somehow being independent frontiersmen who develop these creative instincts and do it on their own, and all of a sudden something magical happens,
right.
And it gets poof, there's a book there, and it's distributed at all the bookstores, and you end up on TV, being shown at some bookstore in Minnesota, giving a group of potential readers a synopsis.
Right. Well, John was a great partner, and he was one of the key players.
John
Trexler,
who is?
the executive director of the Worcester County Horticultural
Okay.
Society, and he actually helped me to acquire a grant from Nathaniel Wheeler Trust to fund
Oh.
some of my research. I also, there was just a lot of people, people like Ken Moynihan at Assumption College, who's been a friend for a long time, was a resource. Different people, you know, who had done research, or I sort of came across them in the process of my research, who had information they could share. I interviewed a lot of people for the book.
So even after you write it, do you have somebody look it over for you to make sure that it's readable?
Absolutely.
And that all right, so you have people helping you gather the information, doing the research, and giving you ideas on what should be included. Then afterwards, after you actually put it on paper, who would you ask to read it over?
Well, John read every chapter.
Uh-huh.
I also actually had the book reviewed by a couple of scholars. David Schuyler and William Cronin read drafts of the book, and they're both urban historians. So those were the main reviewers.
But I think that's normal in any process.
Sure.
Especially a novice. I assume this is your first one.
It is my first book. I've been a published journalist for quite a few years before that. I mean, now, you know, today with the internet, another method of approaching publishing a book is to actually publish your work as a blog, and then have
really?
people comment on it and take their feedback. And
What
then
prevents them from stealing your ideas? Or your entire book, for that matter?
Well, that's a good question.
Well, that's scary. Okay, yeah.
I mean, I
Can
think.
you copyright it on the internet?
Well, I don't know the answer to that
okay,
question.
that would be interesting to find that out.
Yeah.
Because it's expensive. It's expensive to go through this process.
Absolutely.
And what happens if you don't sell them? Who's obligated to pay the publisher?
Well, the publisher takes a risk.
Oh, the publisher is assuming some of the risk of
Right.
the cost of printing.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you have a contract with the publisher?
Well, I had a contract with
Yeah.
the publisher, and I fulfilled the contract.
Okay.
My terms were to complete the manuscript.
Oh.
Right. And then
So,
they went ahead and did the printing and the promotion and the selling of the book at the time it was published. After they got to a certain point with the book, they decided that they were going to unload the copies, and that's when I bought them back.